Hey, Documentary First listeners, we are so excited to announce that our amazing podcast is now brought to you by our friends at Artillery Sports. I want to tell you that Artillery Sports is veteran owned and operated by a veteran. And he created this company to help veterans. So if you play pickleball and you play golf, this company is for you because you now can help veterans by purchasing some of their 5-star series pickleballs, golf balls, and bamboo golf tees. It's really amazing because every 20% of the profits that come in, they are given to veterans organizations that help veterans get low or no cost healthcare, which if you have veterans in your family and they've tried to get healthcare from the VA or they've tried to get healthcare somewhere else, you know how impossibly difficult and hard that is. So one way that you can help them is to purchase pickleballs, golf balls, and golf tees so that this veteran can give to these organizations that help them do this. I know this veteran personally. He's an incredible man. He used to be with the 101st Airborne Division, of course, my regimental division. I don't know that I can say that correctly, but they are close to my heart. Anyway, so back to the sponsor ad. He is also a supporter of our films because he believes that they have been such a blessing to veterans and their families. So he's offering you a discount. So if you head on over to artillerysports.com today and you use the code DOCFIRST, capital D, capital F, DOCFIRST, you'll get a 10% discount off your order today. So go on over to artillerysports.com. Documentary First, an inside look at documentary filmmaking. I'm Christian Taylor, I'm your host, and I'm here with two other wonderful friends from Documentary First, Todd Anderson and David Patterson. Welcome, guys. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
We're here because we are going to be talking about theatrical release. Our film, The Girl Who Wore Freedom, finally, after 4 years, has had its first limited national release. We're super proud about this. We feel like we've done something that no one ever has done before in independent film. And so we want to talk through it, share this information with others. And it's really going to take us probably 3 different episodes to cover all of this. It's been a monumental task. And we're going to start by introducing each other and everybody here, talk about how we met, how this whole crazy train began, and then we're going to set the table for how the idea developed and go into what it all took, and then what our plan was for executing it and the execution of it, and then what the results of the theatrical run were. So stick with us over these next 3 episodes, and we hope that you too can learn from what we did and what we succeeded in and what we need to do differently. So let's start by introducing you guys and telling our audience how you got involved in this crazy train. So David, let's start with you.
Hi, my name is David Patterson. Some of you may remember me because I was on before. I'm a filmmaker based in just outside of New York City. I've done some feature films. I've done some medium, lower independent films. I've done some shorts, as well as several documentaries, which include The Girl Who Wore Freedom, which I can honestly say is the best one I've worked on and the one I'm most proud of. It's really a wonderful piece of work. I think hopefully a lot of you guys have seen it. If not, go out and rent it. Don't go to a library or any place where it's cheap. Go ahead and do a payable download so we can get this filmmaker's money back. I bumped into Christian via a magazine about my college. There was an article about her making her first film, a documentary. She was in the process of editing it and not exactly sure how to take on the festival circuit, but she certainly was going to go at it. I tracked down her email and I reached out to her and said, my name is David Patterson. Apparently went to school about the same time, even though I don't think we ever met. And I'd certainly like to help you in any way because I went online. I saw a little bit about it. I thought it was a very wonderful project. So I offered to send her a check for $500 and advise her on how to run the festival circuit because I had advised for several festivals and I had gone through the circuit festival with several of my own films. And so I sent that email to Christian and she said...
keep your $500 and why don't you come on board and help us, which was the best decision that I ever made. It's been incredibly important for me because I've learned so much from David. David is being entirely way too humble. He has been in this industry for a very long time. What he did, say is correct. We were at Catholic University together. We might as well give a little love to our university there in Washington, D.C. It's a wonderful arts-focused college. And when we were there, the theater school was just phenomenal. And we were both in this Hartke theater program, even though we didn't know each other. I'm sure I stepped over you at some sort of party while you were trashed out on the floor.
Yes, I was a professional drinker even back then. So
And then he went on to do acting and stunt work, still a stunt man. And he also is a writer. He's written plays that were on Broadway or off Broadway. And then he also is a incredibly accomplished filmmaker. His film that is most notable is The Bridge to Terabithia, but there are many others that you can find on IMDb. So I recommend that you look him up. And what most people don't know is he is also a volunteer firefighter in Manhasset, as well as a park commissioner, right? Is that what it is? A park
you
commissioner?
got it.
Yeah. And he was a stay-at-home dad. So how he juggled all of those balls and helped me at the same time, I'm not quite sure. But David, I do want to thank you. It's been a tremendous journey learning from you. And David was the one that spearheaded this effort for this limited theatrical release. And he was just a mastermind at how he went about this. So I can't wait for him to tell us how this all came down. So he did. He's been on our teams, I think, since 2021,
Mhm.
2021, I think. And at that time, I really was, trying to make it in the film festival circuit, but it was still COVID. And it was very, very tough. And usually, you go through this film festival circuit, and I had no idea what I was doing. Thankfully, David came on and advised through that whole process which film festivals to aim for, what order to aim for them in, and where to spend my money, where not to spend my money. It was just brilliant at how he guided me through that whole process. Typically, one option at the end of that is to have a limited theatrical release to four wall in a theater or something like that. But it was COVID and theaters were closed and it wasn't really an option. People weren't really going out. And of course, there was no way that an independent documentary film like mine during a COVID time when nobody's going to the theater was going to have its limited run. So that wasn't even an option. And so straight from the film festival, we went into distribution, which the first attempt at distribution was not very successful because we went with a distributor that stole all our money and only had us distributed on iTunes in the US and Canada. So that did not pan out very well. And we terminated that contract. And then in 2022, we started with our new distributor, Virgil Films, which has been a fantastic solution, just a wonderful relationship. And so for the last year plus, the film has been on several streaming platforms and doing very well. It was also on Delta Airlines for a time. The issue has been that I haven't yet broken even. The film cost me about $500,000, but it continues to cost money as you got to spend money to make money. And so there's always this balance of spending money to try to make your money back. And so I've not yet broken even with this film. And David is always constantly reminding me that this is a fantastic film and you need to make sure that you get paid for screening the film, because we have done that a lot publicly. And I oftentimes want to do it gratis because it's usually for volunteer organizations, or I desperately want people to see the film. But he has been a champion at trying to figure out how to get us paid so that we can actually make money on the film. Now, I knew that part of the problem was we had nobody to focus on any sort of sales situation. Nobody. There was nobody focused on sales. And I have to say that if you have a film and you want to make your money back, sales are super important, and you can't sit around and wait for your distributor to make all the sales for you. It's just not going to happen. Distributors these days, they're going to put your film on a platform and they will reach out and they will try to help you, but they have lots of films to market. And so at the end of the day, if you want to make money back on your film, you are going to have to usher it through the sales process. And I just did not have the bandwidth or team members to be able to do that. And however, I did have a friend in sales who was a successful salesman, who happened to be a friend of my husband's that I would often have dinner with. And his name happened to be Todd Anderson. And so, Todd, why don't you talk about how I dragged you onto this crazy train?
Sure. My name's Todd Anderson. You will not find me in IMDb anywhere, or at least not the real Todd Anderson. I've known Christian for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. Our spouses were co-workers, colleagues at a company near Chicago. And so we got to know each other as friends. And over time, we talk about what we were doing. And I remember you talking about going over to France. And one thing led to another. Next thing we knew, you were trying to make a movie about it. So we were very much just interested friends at that point. I had no experience in the entertainment industry. I now have 8 or 9 months of it. I had spent 30.
You have a master's degree, actually, at this point.
I had 30 plus years in automotive industry. Had done sales engineering as well as project management type activities, a number of things more general than anything. And I had the opportunity earlier, or less than a year ago, to quit my gig and go do some other things. And this was one thing I was interested in. I'd known about this project. I'd known about the movie. We were quite proud of the fact we knew the filmmaker, and we're thrilled when we saw the final product and the movie itself. And we'd always, we'd get together at dinners and talk about the next activity, what you're doing, how are you trying to make money, that sort of thing. And it was always, I was curious as to the business model, the industry you're in, and how do you make money? How does it compare to what, the world I had come from? What are the barriers? What are the, what leverage do you have here or there? And there are a lot of similarities, even though the lingo may be different and the processes may be different. I figured I could help out somewhere, even if I was just, holding a camera or holding a light or something like that, or pushing a broom. I figured I could provide some assistance. And she suggested, I said, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll do some volunteer work here or there. She said, well, why don't you volunteer for me? I said, oh, that's a good idea. Sounds like a fun project, and we'll see where it goes. So, we got together, maybe 8 months ago and sort of talked about the position she was in and the opportunities they had and what the thoughts were going forward. And, it was difficult to kind of figure out what else could you do with this. And so I think when Dave jumped in and said, hey, let's, it's the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Let's make this a theatrical run. And he actually knew where to go and who to contact and how to contact them and what buttons to push to make sure that they understood that this was a good idea for them to do. It gave us something to run with, and it gave me a broom to push. So
Yeah.
It's been fun to see all of that come about and make our way there. But my involvement in the movie was just, hey, I was a friend, I was a fan, and I had some extra time, and I was interested in helping to help out Christian, help out the team. But let's face it, I've had a chance to learn some things and kind of grow my knowledge of the world. And I guess that's sort of what I was looking for, was a new experience. So it's been fun to take that on, and happy to be part of the team.
So Todd is kind of downplaying his overall arch when it came to the release. He was a conductor on a train that could have gone off the rails half a dozen times. We'll talk about deliverables, but that'll be one of the most challenging things for filmmakers when they are getting it to theaters. And if we didn't have this conductor, half the stations would not have received the deliverables and half the theaters would not have shown the film. So he's downplaying his importance because it was not just a sales, it was manipulating the deliverables to make sure that there were actual sales to happen.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing that's so interesting about Todd's involvement, and this is what I want to encourage filmmakers who are listening to this podcast. A lot of people ask me, how do you put this team together? And I've had to be in the situation of being very creative of how to put this team together because I don't have money to pay people. And I have had little bits of money to pay people here and there. And there's some times where money to pay people was absolutely critical. I had to pay my editor. That was one that I could not get around. There was no way I would have a film without paying the editor who had to spend enormous amounts of time with this film. But I did need to look at other ways to get people to help me. And Todd is right. They have been friends and interested in the film for a long time and watched the journey. But also, what Todd didn't mention is that his father was in the Navy. So his father was, serving during the Vietnam time, and his father was they were also very interested in our film. So very early on, Todd mentioned, my father was in the Navy. They live in the villages, and that's a community that's very veteran focused. Maybe you should go down there and try to raise some funds. And if you're a longtime listener to this podcast, you will find if you dig back in the early episodes, the episode where I went to the villages and I stayed with Todd's parents. And I did raise a couple of $1,000 showing the trailer to the villages and making some presentations. And that was the initial relationship, where it kind of started with Todd and his parents. They also became contributors to the film because they really believed in the message. So when I think about, and it's true with David too, these people cared about the message of the film. They were passionate about the message of the film. They felt like it was a good piece of art. And that was where you got to start. So when you want people to be involved with your film, I think you have to look at people that are naturally interested, naturally involved. And then in Todd's situation, Todd had been working in the sales industry for 30 years. And I have known that sales is sales. It does not matter what you're selling. If you're selling a widget, you're selling a widget. It doesn't matter what industry it is. Todd didn't have, he was so worried that I don't have any idea about the entertainment industry. And I was like, well, you'll learn. You'll learn what you need to learn. But the basics are all the same. And I don't think he believed me at the time. And you do need to get in a new frame of mind and you need to learn some lingo. And it is a very different group of people to work with. And so he did come with us on a shoot, which we've talked about before, of him coming to Nashville and working on the Heroes of Carenton shoot. And he began to get a taste of what it was like to work on a film set. And I thought that I had him hooked at that time and he was going to join right away. And he drugged me on a few more months. And then it was getting down to the real nitty gritty. And I called him one more time to just say, Todd, I know that, you probably still aren't ready to make a decision, but I really do need you and I'm ready anytime. And at that time he said, well, you know what? I think I'm ready to join. And that was right at the end of last year, I think November maybe. And right around that same time, I'd been talking to David. And early in January, David reached out to me and I'll never forget this. He said, Christian, this is your year. This is your year. You're going to make money this year. So let's go. And that was the beginning of this incredible adventure. Now, and it has been David that has taught us all how to do this and has really educated us all on this part of the industry. So David, what made you say that? Why did all of a sudden you just decide this is what we're going to do?
Well, it was several things coming together all at once. But the most important thing was, even though she had made the film a couple years earlier, this was the 80th anniversary of D-Day. We kind of skipped over the COVID festival circuit. The COVID festival circuit was anemic. The vast majority of festivals canceled. Some were online. The big festivals shared each other's films rather than, once it would premiere at one festival, they wouldn't show it at another. If it was at Tribeca, it would not show at Toronto, but they all ganged up together and said, we're going to show the same 12 documentaries, which basically wiped out the chance for another 150 documentaries to actually be seen in some of the larger festivals. So we were cheated. We were cheated out of it. We went and got a distributor who was lousy, and that's probably for a whole nother subject. But fact is that in any profession, there's a bunch of liars who try to make money off you, and this was one of those scenarios. For every good distributor, there's 1,000 awful ones, and we just happened to find one of those semi-awful ones, and luckily we were able to get it back. But you know, the festival circuit had passed several years. Taylor Christian was struggling to try to figure out a direction of this, and she was getting some bookings and such. But I said, you know, this is the year. It's the 80th anniversary. And I said, what will we not have on the 85th anniversary is veterans. I mean, the vast majority will be gone. And guess what? People don't care about the 81st anniversary. They don't care about the 82nd, 83rd, or 84th. They go, the 85th. So the objective was to reach out to theater companies to say, this literally is your last opportunity to honor your local veterans. And if you don't, then there's not going to be a chance to honor them on the 85th. The fact is, there's about 200,000 plus World War II veterans still alive today. By the 85th, I don't know, 20,000, and that will be the kids that lied and got in when they were 14 or 15 years old. So part of the objective was to convince these theaters to honor the veterans in their communities. What I knew was the big theater companies just don't care. They really don't care. So AMC, Regal, the big ones, I wasn't even going to approach. What I said was, we go after the mom and pop theater chains where they own 5 to 10 theaters, but each theater has 10 to 12 screens. And most of these mom and pop theater companies also are, the owners are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who had parents and uncles and cousins in World War II. And if not, in Vietnam or Korea. And so they understand the importance of veterans. And part of the pitch was, you know, they're able to show whatever film they want in the theater because of what happened 80 years ago. That fight for freedom was also the fight for you to show whatever you want in your theater and not be censored. And so the idea to go after these theater companies was to say, do something for your town, do something for community, do something for the people that gave you the opportunity to own a movie theater. And they bought into that. They bought into that. And
well, before they bought into it, I had to buy into it.
Well, you had to buy
and
into
it was, yeah, and it was tough for me because, you know, you did keep telling me that, okay, look, we can make money off of this. And I truthfully had a hard time believing that, just because I know how hard it is to get anybody in movie theaters these days, period. Much less, you know, for a documentary, much less unless there is some major marketing to help people get in. And I also know that we have a very tiny team. That's another issue that I had. And yes, it was the 80th anniversary, and I had a heck of a lot of things going on. So I knew there were screenings, and I knew I was taking a veteran to Normandy, and I knew I had just a lot of stuff on my plate. And so I could not figure out how just you and I were going to do this. And, you know, maybe we could hook Todd into this and do this. But, you know, once you had the idea or the call of this is going to be the year, you called me next and you said, I have a list and this is how we're going to start. And so talk to me about this list, where this list came from and how that kind of jump started us.
Sure. Well, my very first film was at Sundance many, many years ago, and I've continued to attend on and off over the last couple of years, but I've always gone as an industry professional. Yes, it costs money, but one of the things you get out of that is you get a mailing list, a very extensive mailing list of attendees that go to Sundance. And those attendees are anywhere from producers to directors, to actors, to cinematographers, you know, all the crew type things, but also film buyers and also theaters that decide to go to Sundance to look at the films and say, hey, I'm going to put that in my little indie theater to show my community that it's a cool movie that you probably wouldn't normally get to see anywhere else. So what Todd and I started to do was actually start to go down that list and figure out who we don't need. We don't need actors. We don't need the directors. We were starting to look at who we could go after. Another group that we went after were film festival artistic directors, because they also go to see what films are showing there, because these film festival artistic directors generally are also with an arts group in a community that they show independent films anyway. And a lot of them actually had some of these independent films at their theater, or choose to put it in their festival. And so we decided to go after those folks as well and to see if there's interest. And so we crafted an email that would go out, and depending who we were going out to, it would be adjusted slightly to try to get them interested in the film. We narrowed down a list of, I think it was like 900 individuals down to about 110. And, we felt if we got a 5% return rate, even an acknowledgement from folks, then that would be pretty good for a mass emailing. And Todd actually did a good point. I think Todd had more responses than I did, which really kind of annoyed me since I was a Sundance attendee. But we started to secure interest from theater companies that subsequently showed the film.
So let me get this straight. So you had this list and you just, you kind of did the cold calling thing. And you crafted an email that said, we have this film. And you gave them your pitch of, this is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. You really do need to give your veterans in your community some love. We will help you market the film. You need to show this. And at that time, did you give them any terms?
No terms at all.
No. Okay. Did you send them a link? Did you?
No. What we did, and this is very important for people doing outreach, because of junk emails and spam nowadays, if you send something uninvited to a lot of places with an attachment, it will immediately go to junk files or spam, and they'll never take a look at it. So, the one thing that you are doing is you're sending an email, and it is a pretty pleased email. But if they like it and read it, you say, we'd be more than happy to send on a link and additional information about it should you be interested. Because even though a lot of filmmakers are like, no, I got to give them all the material right off because they have to look at it, they won't, because it won't get to them. So it always has to be a hello, can I send you something? And of course, yes, it has to be very well-crafted email. One thing that Todd and I did with Todd, mine was a little different because of my involvement with Sundance stuff. But Todd, part of his line was, I'm sorry I wasn't able to see you at Sundance this year. Well, he was never at Sundance. But, or sorry I missed you at Sundance this year. Well, he was never at Sundance. But it wasn't a lie. He was just saying, I missed you at Sundance this year. So people naturally, automatically suspected that Todd was in the business, knew what he was talking about, obviously had their name from a list. So he was someone that they should respond to. And of course, I guess that's always the biggest thing, is your first sentence to these people has to have a hook.
Yeah, at that time, we didn't even know what the terms were going to be. I don't think we could quite envision how we were going to work with them. It might be different with each one. The whole goal was just to get their attention and to hurry up and get the pitch in there and make sure that they might be able to win by showing this film at the right time. I think the other good thing about it was David helped us be very selective in who we were going after. So again, we didn't go after every theater in the country. We didn't go after the big ones who probably already have plenty of blockbusters lined up. We went after the smaller ones who are looking for something special, something for the community, something that something that could be unique, that maybe they would even want to frame an event around it and do a little more with it. So that was really the point. But Dave was able to give us really the right words and everything to be able to reach them. That it was immensely helpful for him to have that background of working with theaters in the past and to understand exactly where to push and maybe where to suggest, but just to have the right wording in there for the most part. And then he was extremely prolific in sending out those letters, I can tell you.
Yeah, and David comes to the team with two skills. He is a writer, number one. And number two, he does have the background to know the names of the theater chains and things like that. But he also did his own research. I mean, he was a researcher. He researched a lot. He researched a lot of the facts to find out what, the veterans in the town. And he did an immense amount of research. And so I think when people are thinking about doing this on their own, they need to find somebody that does have those skills, willing to be a good writer, willing to do the research to find out who the theater chains are, willing to, spend a lot of time sort of on that kind of heady, challenging stuff, so that they can lead and guide everybody else. I know that without that work, none of us could have done what we did. So David laid the groundwork so that all the rest of us could, do what he asked us to do. The other thing that I know is important is, Todd, you created something that allowed us to track this, because like you said, I think you ended up making outreach to 100 theaters. Is that right? Or 100 chains?
No, I'd say in the end we went after 200,
probably
200 plus theater chains and independent theaters.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a lot to keep up with. How in the world, and I just remember emailing them once, people don't get back to you, the follow up, if we weren't keeping track of that, it would have never happened. So Todd was our guy that was the one that kept track of all of that from the beginning. How did you do that, Todd?
Yeah, it didn't take long before we realized this was going to be a mess after we sent out a handful of letters, and sometimes you get an answer, sometimes you don't. And then on top of that, each one we kind of crafted separately for each location. We wanted to highlight maybe if something about their community, maybe they have a lot of veterans there, maybe they have an Air Force base nearby, something that might get their attention, and let them know that, hey, we're talking directly to them. This isn't a mass email necessarily. So we took our time in doing that, but we sent out a lot of them. And I think we realized quickly that it was difficult to keep track of who answered and who didn't answer and who did we already send it to. And we've got this other name and email address that we sent it to them. So I had started a database just keeping track of all the contacts that we had. Have we sent something out? Should we send something out? And then, of course, it became 10 times as difficult to track once we started getting answers from every which way. And everybody was in a different position as to how interested they were or how not interested they were, what their thoughts were on whether they were going to show it or how or when or so forth. So it started from there, and then it just grew to the point where we've got this huge database where we kept track of everything down to the deliverables and even theater pricing and the dates and times that was being done, and then how did we deliver the film to them and so forth. So it turned into something that I thought we definitely needed. It turned into a much larger chore once things got more complicated. I was surprised, and I think David was also, that we didn't just hear back from, say, 5% of those that we sent out. We heard back from a lot more of those, and most everybody who responded, they ended up working with us. We had very few people that responded and said no. We did get some that responded and said no thanks, but almost anybody who responded, they were hooked. They were interested, and they were willing to work with us.
Yeah, we really didn't get that many no's. We did get a lot of just no response at all, meaning either the emails went dead or they just decided to blow us off. But the people, there was a very small number of no's. So I'm going to say the rest just didn't get to the people, and I'm going to leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think one thing that was, people have to understand is it wasn't one touch per theater. There were times where we did an initial email and they would say, yes, we're interested, send us your materials. And I would say, what would you guys say? 5%, 10% went that way? Or was it less? Most of them were, I'm going to CinemaCon. I can't answer you until blah, blah, blah date. Or I've got this thing going on and I can't answer you till next week. And so a lot of times there were all these dates that were being thrown around where they couldn't answer us or get back to us until this date. And I think that was very important because Todd was keeping track of those specific dates of, okay, we've got to follow up with this person on this date. And I think the tenacity with which Todd was able to follow up again and again, and sometimes again and again, I think that was, yeah, you're still following up. I mean, you just cannot stop that. And it was the same with David. And we had to tag team. So all three of us had a different role. David's role typically was the top level. I am the Sundance, filmmaker that made Bridge to Terabithia and, casting the vision. Then he would toss it to the filmmaker who would provide the, granular details of the film and give the press packet and give the film link and, can talk about whatever else you need. And then here's Todd who can give you any of the deliverables or whatever. And so because all three of us were involved in the emails, sometimes we would do the old good cop, bad cop, or listen, I've reached out to this person. They've heard from me twice now. Why don't you try emailing them? I mean, we did that a lot, right?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest challenges, and we had this in our post talks, was we wish we had more time to market the cities that the theaters were showing. But they just mentioned the problem is they would not give us a commitment to a theater or a date. And so it's really hard to reach out to the local communities when you don't have that information. So Todd would go back, and then I would go back at some point and say, look, our marketing team is really on our back. Can you at least confirm a town and an approximate date? Because our whole focus this whole time, it was one of our selling points to these theaters, was this is not an open run. This is a pinpointed, surgical, limited run right around D-Day, maybe the day before and the day after, or the weekend following. You can put in some matinees. So it was always, that's something that interested them, right? I'm sure many people say, hey, I want an open run in your theater. And they're just like, no, I don't know who you are. I don't know if your film's any good. I don't know if we can get an audience. But, our marketing angle was it was D-Day. Second marketing angle was do it around D-Day. Third angle was get us the information so we will help market it for you, going after the local communities themselves. And so that was our biggest, I'd say, disappointment or challenge, because we weren't going to reach out to all these communities until we were confirming that it's showing in their town. And so we did a lot of pre-prep to send out that material, but we couldn't send that material out until we got a green light. And I think, Todd, in some of those cases, it was less than 2 weeks, right? When they gave us dates and times specifically.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Some of these places aren't planning that far out. And they're determining dates up to up to a week beforehand.
And even when they gave us a commitment to a theater and a date, they don't post the times till 7 to 5 days before. And this is what all theaters do. This is a very common occurrence. You don't see the times of the next week until the end of that week for the next week. And so that, I was pretty pleased. It was just like, yeah, we'll get done when we get done.
And I think that was such a fascinating thing to learn, because until you dive in neck deep with these theaters, you don't really understand how they operate. But they're, in a sense, flying by the seat of their pants based on what is happening with their audience response to the films in their theater and the films that they're getting. And so if Hollywood is sending them different films at different times, and based on how those films do, they will either open up other theaters, or they will close it down to one theater, or they will shift the times around to see if, a different audience will come in. And so because they're always, jiggering it like that and trying to figure out how to, make the most bang for the buck, it is difficult for them to give you an actual hard number, which does make it hard for us on the other side. So all of that was new information that we had never learned before, but it made it very frustrating on our side to do our job, and to do it well and to help market things, in advance. But I will say, without the tracking, and at the end of the day, having someone that's a gearhead, a math head, a person that can run the numbers, keep the numbers, that's detail oriented, that is willing to spend the time in the spreadsheet, to track all of that. Without all of that, it would have been a mess, utter chaos, because we did need to know, when things were showing and who we had answers from and who we didn't have answers from. And so thankfully, Todd was like you said, the conductor of that train.
And as you mentioned, I mean, we're talking about thousands upon thousands of emails. So for all of us trying to keep track, Todd, on one of his schematics, he said, did you ever get back to so-and-so who reached out to you last week? And both myself as well as Christian, like, oh, did I? Oh, I didn't. And, these were sales. I mean, these were potential sales. And we just, it almost fell under the tracks, but the conductor made sure that we got back on the train and reached out to these folks to make sure that we secured those dates.
Yeah, it was a huge group effort. Now, one thing I want to point out, David, is your craftiness at capturing some of these theaters. So in our initial push for these 200 theaters, you took your list, which are mostly, let's say, film managers, and you would send the emails out to the film managers. And oftentimes on those first emails, not a lot of people would get back to us. And so that frustrated you. And so you decided to get a little bit creative with, how you were going to get some answers. So tell us what your thought process is and how you solved that problem.
Well, a lot of the way things get done in Hollywood is through guilt or fear. And so, and the guilt is that your boss will find out that you did something dumb, or the fear that your boss found out you did something dumb. So, I would reach out to these folks, and, sometimes the email, I just did not respond back, whether it went, down a toilet or something like that. I don't know. So I would reach out to that same person again, but research who's the next higher up was, or who was the owner of the theater or the company. And I would CC those folks. And miraculously, lots of times the first person that ignored me was responding to me, because obviously his boss said, you didn't respond to this guy, at least check out the film. And so I used guilt and fear, and then, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble, to get these people to respond. And Christian and Todd were on a lot of those emails, were the first ignored, and then they saw it when I would add one or two other people to it. And lots of times, if I didn't hear from those people, I would go again and track down some emails from some other folks. With the larger theater companies, their marketing department would be included on it, because then they'll go, oh, yeah. I mean, one thing that I didn't mention is our first catch with all these folks was one of the second or third lines was we would tell them how many veterans, World War II veterans, were in their town. And so part of that is like, so you're going to ignore these people? Here's an opportunity to honor these people, probably the last time ever. You're going to just ignore them? Or should at least respond to this email. And so that's how I think when the bosses saw that, like, come on, we got 20 World War II veterans in town. Let's hear what they got to say. It sounds like this is something we can do for no cost at all, but it makes us look good. And that's
because we weren't going. The typical movie deal is not, you are going to pay us to show this movie. So we knew it wasn't going to cost these movie theaters anything to show our film. It's not going to cost them anything to show our film. It's everything in their favor. And so, it really did not, it behooved, them to at least answer the email. But you also used another tool, David, that came in extremely handy on many different occasions. Talk to us about that.
Well, the first thing that I came across and all filmmakers should know about is called Cinema Treasures. It is a great website. And one of the things it does, it lists pretty much all the theater chains, or all the theater chains and independent theaters in the United States. So, and with sometimes with contact information of like who's the manager at the theater or the company that it owns. And then I would start to work off that to try to track down who to reach out to. I jokingly say this, Christian always winces, but the great thing about the internet, it's not just for free porn. It's because you can find everything on the internet that you need to. So, in addition to looking at LinkedIn, I use Facebook to track down certain people. And then, the best thing that I came across was a company called Rocket Reach, which basically there is a fee that you have to pay, but basically it will provide you with an email or half a dozen emails to a particular person. And they actually rate it, that this is probably the best email. These other ones, not so much. Like it's A+ rating means this email works. It'll reach that person. And then it goes down less and less. And so I would use both Cinema Treasures and then Rocket Reach to figure out who to reach out to. And again, Rocket Reach, if you put the company in, it'll break down, 5 or 6 people from the company. And you'll see, obviously, the person selling concessions is probably not the person you want to reach out to, right? It's the person you want to reach out to is the theater buyer. That was another thing. I would Google theater buyers for film companies. That name would pop up somewhere on an article or something like that. But their contact wasn't there, but it was on Rocket Reach. And so literally I was able to track down a lot of these people. And again, if you have their correct email, then it's probably not going to go to spam. But again, I didn't put any attachments or anything like that to make sure it didn't go to spam. And then it got to them. And if they ignored it, then using Rocket Reach, I'd reach out again, and their boss was CC'd. And so, a lot of times this is how we would move forward.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, so many interesting things happened as we went down this email journey. I learned about CinemaCon. I had never heard about CinemaCon before, but several of them said, we'll talk to you after we get back to CinemaCon. And I was like, what is CinemaCon? And basically, it's the place where all the theater owners go to learn about all the different movies out there. So, Hollywood and anybody else that has a movie to sell is going to CinemaCon to pitch their films. So that's something that I will look into for next year. Is that something that is worth spending money to go and try to make a sale at CinemaCon? I learned about that. I also learned we stumbled upon a film buyer. So David at one point sent an email to, I think, a manager who may or may not have answered. But then he sent it to the owner and maybe the manager, and the owner responded. Or actually, I think what happened was the film buyer said, my owner told me I have to buy this film, right? Isn't that what happened?
Yep.
And so that film buyer then said, I am the buyer for 1,400 theaters or something like that, where we went, oh no, we kind of panicked because we're like, oh my gosh, is he going to put our film in that many places? Didn't happen. But still, now we have we have the information for this buyer who buys for 1,400 theaters. So in that, process, we learned so many different things like that. Just that kind of dogged research and painstaking emails. I wish I knew how many emails we sent, thousands upon thousands. At the final end, when we were doing just outreach to towns to tell them about the film, my son Josh, who was helping us out, said, I have never sent this many emails in my whole life. And I was like, how many emails did you send, Josh? I sent 2,000 emails.
And
that was at the end.
Josh was just one of 10 people doing that, if you think about it. And so that was a lot of emails. And so I'm sure people going, well, who was that? Who was that? Well, once we found out that it was going to a town, we went after all the local politicians. We went after the Chamber of Commerce. We went after VFWs. We went after American Legions. We went after the Rotary, Kiwanis. We went after the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts. It was called the Girl Who Wore Freedom. So we were going out to local troops to let them know about this. And again, let them know that there was a certain number of World War II veterans in their community. And this was a great opportunity to learn about what they did and honor them. And in fact, we had the mayor of Salt Lake City do a proclamation for June 6th, acknowledging all the veterans of Salt Lake City who served in World War II, but all the veterans that followed them, and mentioned our film that was showing on D-Day. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, honestly, for me, and what they were doing is they were recognizing D-Day. They were recognizing D-Day. They were proclaiming it, a day to think about, recognize, honor D-Day and those that served. That was one of the hugest objectives that I had, that people in America would begin to be aware of D-Day and how many people we lost, these men that died so that we could all be free, and a date that means nothing to any of us here in the United States. So when I made the film, that was one of my initial objectives. And so to think that this theatrical release had that intended effect just gave me chills. And it was one of the things that I was able to say in Normandy. I was able to tell my French friends that this is what is happening in the United States because of this film. And they were just, incredibly blessed and so excited that we were doing this and being able to spread this word. So, we're going to have to wrap up our first episode. We have so much more to talk about, but we're now at 42 minutes in. And I just really appreciate you guys spending time with us today. And thank you for all of your input and insight. And gosh, I can't wait to hear kind of the rest of the story and share more with everybody else. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to Documentary First, where we believe everybody has a story to tell and you can be the one to tell it. Bye, everybody.